Chosen one, don't be fooled. What you see isn't what's real. The surface of this world is full of illusions, shadows dressed as truth, lies wrapped in glitter, and if you're not awake, you'll believe it. But you, the chosen one, you were born to see through the mask. The veil is lifting, and God is exposing everything that was hidden, every deception, every counterfeit, every false light. It all crumbles when His truth arrives. The people who doubted you, who laughed, who thought they understood you, they only saw the version of you that was convenient for their eyes. But God always saw your essence, and that's why He called you His. Remember this: what looks powerful in the world often hides weakness, and what looks weak in the world often hides divine strength. You are that strength. Type 777 inches the comments if you know it's time for the masks to fall. Every battle you fought was not against flesh and blood, but against illusions. The enemy never had to touch you, they only had to trick you into believing their lies. But you refused. You kept standing. And that is why you are still here. Look around. So many have fallen because they mistook lies for truth, shadows for light. But you, your vision cuts through the smoke. That's why the devil fears you. That's why the world can't box you in. And while others chase what looks shiny, you're being handed what is real: true wealth, true love, true freedom. These are not for the masses, they are reserved for those God has chosen. Don't be fooled by the illusion of scarcity. God's table for you is already overflowing, and no lie can keep you from it. Hit that like button right now, not just as a click, but as a declaration that you see through the deception. Chosen one, when you walk into a room, people sense something they can't explain. They project illusions onto you, but those illusions never stick. They may call you weak, but then they watch you rise. They may call you ordinary, but then they can't stop staring. It's because your presence exposes what's false in them, and they hate it. But at the same time, they're drawn to it. This is why your journey has felt so lonely, because you're not of their world. You see what's real, while they're still clinging to shadows. Comment 777 again if you feel this in your spirit. Listen carefully. The devil can't create anything. All he can do is distort. All he can do is disguise. And that disguise is what most people fall for. But you, God gave you discernment. You sense what others miss. You notice the energy in a word, the spirit behind a smile, the intention in a gesture. That's your gift. That's your shield. And that's why no weapon formed against you has ever prospered. Chosen one. God said, everything will be exposed. Every fake friend, every false prophet, every counterfeit opportunity, gone. The truth will stand, and you will stand with it. This is your season of clarity. This is your time to rise. Subscribe now to join thousands of chosen one souls walking this same path. Together, we see beyond the surface, and together, we step into what is real. Even in your darkest hours, when you thought you were blind, God was training your vision. He allowed you to see through betrayal so you could recognize loyalty. He allowed you to taste lack so you could recognize abundance. He allowed you to walk through shadows so you could recognize His light. And now nothing can fool you again. You're unstoppable because you know the truth. The world is an illusion, but God is reality. Type 777 one more time if you're ready to walk in that truth. And remember this, chosen one. Don't be fooled by appearances, because what you see isn't what's real. What's real is already inside you, and it's already unfolding before your eyes. Chosen one, the world has trained people to trust only what their eyes can see. But sight without spirit is blindness. You've always felt it deep in your soul, something about what you're shown doesn't add up. That's because this world is built on false images, projections carefully placed to distract and deceive. The real truth lives behind the curtain, and God is the one pulling it back for you right now. Don't be surprised when everything you thought you knew begins to shift. What looks stable will collapse, and what looked broken will rise with glory. There's a reason you've always questioned the surface. Even as a child, you noticed what others ignored. You saw cracks in the mask people wore. You felt when someone's words didn't match their energy. This wasn't paranoia, it was discernment. That gift was planted in you before you were even born. It's why you've been misunderstood, why people called you too intense, too sensitive, too different. But what they mocked was the very ability that's now guiding you into God's reality. Type 777 inches the comments if you know you were built to see what others can't. Chosen one, don't chase the picture the world paints. They show you success as possessions, power as dominance, love as lust, faith as empty ritual. These are counterfeits. The enemy dresses up emptiness in glitter so that the masses will run toward it and stay enslaved. But you can't be fooled. You know true success is peace, true power is authority from above, true love is sacrifice, and true faith is walking with God, even when nothing makes sense. You see the difference, and that's why your life feels like you're walking against the crowd. And here's the truth. Every illusion is temporary. Lies don't last. Masks crack. Shadows scatter when the light rises. And right now, your very presence is accelerating that exposure. That's why people are uncomfortable around you. You don't even need to speak the truth in your spirit forces them to confront the lies they've been hiding behind. Some will resist you, others will reject you, but a few will recognize your light and follow. That's why God placed you here, to remind the world that not everything they see is real. Chosen one, the enemy has no new tricks. He recycles the same illusions over and over. He makes fear look like wisdom, makes compromise look like love, makes chains look like freedom. But you've walked through enough to recognize the pattern. You've watched doors close only for God to open better ones. You've seen people betray you only for Him to replace them with loyalty. You've faced scarcity only to discover that your provision doesn't come from men but from heaven, so when the illusion comes again, you won't fall for it. You've already seen behind the curtain, but this also means your journey is heavy. To see what others can't is both a blessing and a burden. You'll often feel isolated because not many can walk at your level of clarity. You'll watch people chase after empty things and you'll want to shake them awake, but they won't listen until the illusion breaks on its own. That's why patience is one of your greatest weapons. You've learned to wait until God exposes what's fake, and when it happens, you'll already be prepared to move into what's real while others are scrambling in confusion. And don't mistake loneliness for abandonment. God separated you from the crowd because their illusions would have blinded you. He pulled you away to refine your sight. You were never meant to fit in with their false version of life. You were meant to walk above it. And yes, it hurts to lose people, to outgrow circles, to be misunderstood. But remember, clarity always costs. Those who cling to illusions will leave, and those who crave truth will be drawn to you. Subscribe now and join thousands of chosen one souls who are walking this same narrow path, awake in a sleeping world. Look around you, chosen one. Notice how much of society is built on appearances. People post pictures to look successful while drowning in debt. They smile in public but cry alone. They speak of love but act in fear. The world teaches them to polish the surface while their core rots. But God has been teaching you the opposite, to build from the inside out. That's why your foundation is strong, even when your exterior looks shaky. That's why storms hit you but can't destroy you. Your roots are real, while theirs are just painted on the surface. And here's the warning: the closer you get to your destiny, the stronger the illusions become. The enemy knows he can't take what God gave you, so he'll try to distract you with mirages. He'll make the wrong path look easy, the wrong people look appealing, the wrong choices look harmless. But if you pay attention, your spirit will feel the difference. What is real always carries peace, even when it challenges you. What is false always carries anxiety, even when it looks good. Trust your spirit. It's your compass through the fog. Chosen one, you've already survived what should have destroyed you. That in itself is proof that God's reality is stronger than any illusion. Because the world expected you to fail, yet here you are. They expected you to give up, yet you're still standing. And now the illusions are turning against those who trusted them. Watch as the masks fall off, the fake smiles fade, the false power crumbles. Everything not rooted in truth is collapsing, and in the middle of it, you will rise. Type 777 again if you're ready for the unveiling. Chosen one, illusions are not always loud or obvious. Sometimes they creep in quietly, disguised as advice, wrapped in good intentions, hidden inside familiar voices. That's why discernment is so critical in your journey. Not everyone smiling at you is for you. Not every opportunity is from God. Not every path that looks clear is meant for your feet. You are learning to test the spirit behind everything, and because of that, you will not be misled. What fools others cannot fool you, because God has sharpened your vision in secret places. Think about how many times you almost fell for something that looked perfect but felt wrong. Maybe it was a relationship that glittered on the surface but drained your spirit. Maybe it was a job that promised stability but suffocated your soul. Maybe it was a friendship that seemed supportive but thrived on envy. These were traps disguised as blessings, illusions crafted to waste your time. But each time, something in you resisted. Something whispered, "Wait." That was not paranoia, that was protection. It was your destiny pulling you away from the false so you could make space for the real. Chosen one, your journey is not about avoiding pain. It's about learning to see truth in the middle of pain. Illusions tell you that struggle means failure. Reality tells you that struggle means growth. Illusions tell you that delay means denial. Reality tells you that delay means preparation. Illusions tell you that silence means abandonment. Reality tells you that silence means training. You've been through enough to know the difference now. You've felt God's hand on you, even when no one else could see it. And because of that, you trust His unseen reality more than the world's loud illusions. There will be people who resent your clarity. They will call you arrogant for refusing what everyone else accepts. They will call you rebellious for walking away from the crowd. They will call you ungrateful for not clinging to illusions that never fed your spirit. But let them talk. Their eyes are still blind, and blind eyes always fear the ones who see. Don't waste time convincing them. Your path will prove itself. The very things they mocked you for will become the very things they admire when the illusions finally collapse around them. Chosen one, illusions don't just exist in people, they exist in systems. The world runs on appearances. Education systems teach memorization, not wisdom. Media feeds entertainment, not truth. Politics project power, not service. Even religion can turn into performance when it loses sight of God's presence. You've been shown these cracks, and at times it shook your faith in humanity. But remember, God never asked you to put your trust in systems. He asked you to put your trust in Him. That's why while others panic when systems fail, you remain steady. You were never leaning on them in the first place. Look back at history. Every empire that looked invincible eventually fell. Rome, Babylon, Egypt. They all projected eternal strength, but they were illusions. The stronger they appeared, the faster they crumbled. Why? Because what isn't real cannot last. This is happening again in our time. Systems built on greed and fear are shaking. Structures built on lies are collapsing. Leaders built on image are being exposed. And while the world trembles, you will stand. Because your foundation is not built on illusions, it's built on truth. Type 777 inches the comments if you know you're anchored in reality while everything false is falling apart. Chosen one. One of the greatest illusions you had to break free from was the idea that you were small. The world worked hard to convince you that you were ordinary, replaceable, just another face in the crowd. But deep down, you always knew different. That's why their labels never stuck. That's why their insults never broke you. That's why even in your lowest moments, you couldn't shake the sense that there was more to your life. That feeling wasn't arrogance, it was identity. You are chosen, and chosen ones don't fit into the molds the world tries to force on them. Illusions will always try to shrink what God expands. When your gifts began to show, people tried to silence you. When your vision started growing, people tried to blind you. When your spirit began to shine, people tried to dim you. But all of these attempts failed, because what God places in you cannot be erased by human hands. And now, those same people who tried to bury you are forced to watch you rise. That's what happens when the illusions collapse. The truth of who you are becomes undeniable. And understand this, chosen one, illusions are not just about others deceiving you. Sometimes they're about you deceiving yourself. How many times did you tell yourself you weren't ready when God already called you? How many times did you tell yourself you weren't worthy when God already chose you? How many times did you tell yourself you didn't have enough when heaven already stored abundance in your name? These were illusions of your own mind, shaped by the lies of the enemy. But you're breaking them now. You're learning to see yourself as God sees you, not as the world painted you. The more illusions fall, the more weight leaves your shoulders. You begin to breathe differently, think differently, move differently. You realize you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. You realize you don't have to chase what God already reserved for you. You realize you don't have to explain your calling to those who were never meant to understand it. That freedom terrifies people who are still enslaved by illusions. But you cannot shrink yourself to make them comfortable. You cannot go back to blindness after God has opened your eyes. Chosen one, there is a reason God let you experience betrayal, loss, and rejection. Those were the sharpest illusions, and by breaking them, your sight became clear. You now know loyalty when you see it. You now know abundance when you feel it. You now know love when it touches you. The illusions trained you to recognize the real, and now you're walking into a season where the real is all that remains. The illusions are falling away, and what God has promised will stand in plain view for the world to see. Chosen one, deception often hides in the ordinary. It shows up in the daily routines that seem harmless, in the conversations that feel casual, in the distractions that look innocent. The enemy doesn't always attack with force. Sometimes he attacks with comfort. He lulls people into illusions of safety while stealing their fire, their vision, their purpose. But you've never been fully comfortable in this world. And that discomfort is divine. It's what kept you from being trapped in illusions that swallowed everyone else. That tension you've carried your whole life was God pulling you higher. There is a hidden cost to believing illusions, and you've watched people pay it. They chased material wealth, only to discover they were spiritually bankrupt. They pursued recognition only to realize they had lost themselves. They clung to relationships that looked good in public but destroyed them in private. You've seen the pain behind the pictures. You've witnessed the emptiness behind the applause. And every time you saw it, your spirit whispered, "This isn't real." That whisper was not cynicism, it was truth. It was God warning you not to fall into the same trap. Chosen one, illusions also twist time. They make you feel late when you are actually on schedule. They make you feel behind when God is preparing you ahead. They make you believe that your season has passed when your season has not even started yet. This lie is one of the enemy's sharpest weapons, because if he can convince you that you missed your chance, he can keep you from moving when your moment arrives. But you are not late. You are not forgotten. Every delay was preparation, and every waiting season was training. What you see as wasted time is really foundation being built beneath the surface. And here's the truth about illusions. They are exhausting. Pretending takes energy. Wearing masks drains the soul. Chasing false promises burns the spirit out. That's why you've always felt weary when you tried to force yourself into illusions. Your body rejected what your spirit knew was fake. But the moment you aligned with truth, everything began to flow. Your energy returned, your clarity sharpened, your spirit lifted. That's how you know when something is real. It doesn't drain you, it sustains you. Comment 777 right now if you've felt the difference between what drains you and what sustains you. The illusions of this world are collapsing faster now. Look around at the scandals being exposed, the leaders being unmasked, the institutions being shaken. What people thought was stable is crumbling overnight. And while many panic, you stand calm, because you already knew this was coming. God told you long ago, what is hidden will be revealed, what is false will fall, and what is real will remain. That's why he has been preparing you in silence. He made you strong in the shadows so that when the light hits, you will not break with the rest. Chosen one, there will be moments when illusions try to return, disguised as second chances. People from your past may come back, pretending they've changed. Opportunities you once wanted may appear again, looking more attractive than before. Doors you once prayed for may swing open, tempting you to walk through. But you will feel the difference. You'll sense when it's an old trap dressed as a new blessing. You'll recognize the familiar energy, even if the packaging looks different. That awareness is your shield, and it will save you from repeating cycles that God already freed you from. And understand this, illusions don't only try to trick you, they try to intimidate you. They make noise to distract from their emptiness. They project size to hide their weakness. They act urgent to make you rush into mistakes. But you are learning to be still. You are learning that silence is stronger than noise, that patience is stronger than panic, that discernment is stronger than deception. You don't need to rush where God has already prepared the way. You don't need to fear what he already defeated. Illusions only survive when you believe them, and you refuse to believe lies anymore. Chosen one, your very presence destroys illusions. When you walk into a room, the atmosphere shifts, lies feel heavier, masks feel weaker, shadows feel exposed. That's why some people avoid you. They can't maintain their illusion in your presence. They can't pretend around you. They can't hide behind their masks. And though it hurts to be misunderstood, remember this: it's not rejection, It's revelation. They're not running from you, they're running from themselves. They're running from the truth that your presence forces them to see. The illusions of success are some of the strongest chains in this world. People measure their worth by numbers in a bank account, likes on a screen, or titles on a door. But you were never fooled by that. You may have wanted those things at one point, but deep down you knew they couldn't satisfy. That's why God often kept them from you until you were strong enough not to be owned by them. Because what looks like a blessing can turn into bondage when it's rooted in illusion. And God has no interest in giving His chosen one counterfeit crowns. He saved you for the real inheritance. Chosen one, you have been called to live with vision, not sight. Sight shows you the illusion, but vision reveals the truth. Sight tells you it's over. Vision tells you it's only beginning. Sight shows you closed doors. Vision shows you the keys in your hand. Sight shows you enemies rising. Vision shows you already victorious. That's why you can walk through storms that destroy others, because you are guided by vision, not sight. You don't need everything to look right when you know it already is right in the unseen. That's your advantage, and that's why you will never be fooled again. Chosen one. Illusions are not always grand. They are subtle, creeping in like shadows at dusk. They disguise themselves in routines that feel normal, in advice that sounds practical, in relationships that appear stable. They whisper, "This is enough. Stay where you are." But deep down, you always knew there was more. You felt the pull when everyone else settled. You heard the call when everyone else silenced their dreams. That restlessness inside you was not dissatisfaction, it was revelation. It was proof that the surface reality around you was not the full truth. There are seasons where illusions dress themselves as opportunity. They appear as doors wide open, promising easy success, effortless gain, and instant recognition. But every illusion leaves a trail, and your spirit has been trained to see it. That trail carries anxiety instead of peace, confusion instead of clarity, weight instead of freedom. You have learned not to walk into every door, not to trust every invitation, not to bow to every glittering chance. The enemy cannot bribe you with illusions anymore, because you've already felt the emptiness they lead to. Chosen one. Illusions are most dangerous when they mirror your desires. They don't tempt you with what you don't want. They tempt you with what you've been waiting for. That's why you must stay anchored. That's why you must stay watchful. Because not every answer to prayer comes from God. Sometimes it's a counterfeit sent to pull you off track. But here's the truth. When God sends what is real, it carries peace, timing, and confirmation. When the enemy sends what is fake, it carries urgency, distraction, and confusion. You are learning to tell the difference, and that is your power. Look at the way illusions break down under time. At first they look flawless, polished, perfect. But give them time, and the cracks appear. A fake friend cannot maintain loyalty forever. A counterfeit opportunity cannot produce lasting fruit. A false identity cannot carry peace for long. And when the cracks show, truth pours out like light through shattered glass. This is why God told you to be patient. Time is one of the sharpest weapons against deception. If you wait long enough, the illusion always reveals itself. Chosen one. Illusions thrive on fear. They tell you that if you let go, you'll have nothing. They tell you that if you walk away, you'll be left behind. They tell you that if you trust God, you'll lose control. But fear is always the fingerprint of the enemy. God does not lead with fear. He leads with peace, even in storms. That's how you know what is real. Peace is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of God inside the struggle. You've felt that peace before, and it carried you through when the illusion screamed louder than truth. Every chosen soul must walk through seasons where illusions seem more real than reality. You may have thought the betrayal would break you, but it revealed truth. You may have thought the loss would destroy you, but it cleared your vision. You may have thought the silence meant abandonment, but it sharpened your hearing. Illusions crumble fastest in the presence of pain, because pain strips away the surface and forces you to see what was always there. That's why your suffering was not wasted, it was the breaking of illusions. Chosen one, illusions are like smoke screens. They cloud your vision, making shadows look larger than they are, making threats look closer than they are, making obstacles look impossible. But smoke is powerless against wind, and the Spirit of God is the wind that clears every illusion. How many times have you looked back and realized the thing you feared was never as big as it seemed? How many times did the shadow on the wall look like a giant, only to vanish when the light turned on? That's what illusions do. They magnify emptiness, and that's why they cannot hold you anymore. Even your own reflection was once an illusion. You looked in the mirror and saw weakness, but God saw strength. You saw scars, but God saw survival. You saw a mess, but God saw destiny. The enemy has always tried to distort how you see yourself, because if you ever recognized who you truly are, his illusions would lose all power. And now you are recognizing it. You are walking differently, speaking differently, thinking differently, because you finally understand the reflection in the mirror is not your limit. It is just the beginning of your revelation. Illusions lose their grip when you choose truth over comfort. It is easy to stay where lies feel safe. It is easy to believe what everyone else believes. It is easy to blend into illusions that promise belonging. But you were never created for easy. You were created for real. That is why God pulled you away, why He separated you, why He isolated you. Not to punish you, but to free you from illusions that you didn't even realize were chains. What felt like rejection was really protection. What looked like loss was really liberation. Chosen one, illusions of control are some of the most powerful. The world teaches people that if they just work harder, push further, and fight longer, they can control everything. But that is a lie. Control is an illusion, because life belongs to God, not man. You've been broken enough times to know this. You've watched plans fall apart that looked perfect on paper. You've seen things you held tightly slip from your hands. But every time, what you thought was failure was actually redirection. Control was never yours to carry. It was always God's. And now you live lighter because of it. Illusions tell you that the battle is outside, but the real war is within. It's in your thoughts, your beliefs, your perspective. That's why renewing your mind was the key to your breakthrough. Once you shifted how you saw yourself, once you shifted how you saw God, once you shifted how you saw the world, everything outside of you began to change. The illusions fell, not because they disappeared, but because you stopped believing them. And when you stopped believing them, they lost all power. Chosen one, illusions can even disguise themselves as voices of reason. They come in the form of advice that sounds logical, but strips away faith. They sound like friends telling you to play it safe, mentors urging you to take the easy way, family insisting that risk is foolish. But you know the difference between wisdom and fear. True wisdom aligns with faith, even when it looks impossible. Fear hides behind logic, trying to keep you small. That's why you've learned not to accept every voice as truth. You measure it against what God already told your spirit, and if it doesn't match, you walk away. Illusions often ride on repetition. The more you hear a lie, the easier it is to believe it. That's why the enemy plants the same whispers again and again. You're not ready. You're not worthy. You're not enough. But repetition doesn't make something true. It only makes it familiar. And you have reached the point where you no longer confuse familiarity with truth. You've trained yourself to recognize the pattern, to catch the lie before it roots, to stop the cycle before it repeats. You've broken chains by refusing to repeat the illusions handed to you. Chosen one, illusions are fragile, but they appear powerful when people agree with them. A crowd can make anything look true, even if it's false. Entire cultures have been built on lies simply because everyone accepted them, but you were never made to follow the crowd. That's why their opinions never sat right with you. That's why, even when everyone agreed, you still questioned. And now, the truth you carry feels heavier than the illusions they protect. Don't mistake their numbers for strength. 1,000 voices repeating lies cannot outweigh the single voice of truth. The illusion of comparison is one of the cruelest traps. It convinces people to measure their worth against someone else's highlight reel. It makes them believe they are behind, lacking, insignificant. But you are learning that your path cannot be compared because it was never meant to be duplicated. Your timing, your trials, your growth, your victories, they are uniquely yours. The enemy wants you distracted by what others have so that you miss what God is building in you. But your spirit refuses to be fooled anymore. You know that comparison is a thief and truth is a liberator. Chosen one, illusions often mimic urgency. They push you to rush, to decide without thinking, to grab what's in front of you before it disappears. But urgency is almost always the mark of deception. God does not pressure. He confirms. His timing is steady. His peace is clear. His guidance is calm. When you feel panic pushing you, it is not from him. The world thrives on illusions of urgency because panic keeps people blind. But you have learned to pause, to breathe, to ask, is this real or just noise? That pause is power. That pause is freedom. Illusions do not just live in the external, they live in memory. The enemy will replay old failures in your mind until you believe they define you. He will project old wounds like films on repeat until you think they are your future. But memory is not prophecy. What happened before is not the final word. Your scars are not signs of defeat. They are evidence of survival. Every time the enemy plays the illusion of your past, you counter it with the truth of your present. You are not who you were then. You are who God says you are now. Chosen one. Illusions of strength are some of the most deceptive. They show people flexing power through anger, through pride, through domination. But real strength is quiet. Real strength is restraint. Real strength is the ability to stand unshaken when the world tries to shake you. That is why people don't understand you. They confuse your calm with weakness, your silence with emptiness, your patience with passivity. But you know that storms do not intimidate. Mountains and oceans do not move islands. Your strength is not for show, it is for endurance. Illusions crumble when exposed to truth, but exposure is not always immediate. Sometimes God lets illusions last for a season so that when they fall, the revelation is undeniable. That's why some betrayals took years to reveal themselves. That's why some lies lingered until the right moment. That's why some masks didn't slip until it was too late for them to recover. And though it hurt, you now see why he allowed it. When illusions fall on their own, the truth stands taller. and now your eyes are sharper than ever before. Chosen one. Illusions often wear the costume of success. They make you believe that achievement equals fulfillment, that titles equal purpose, that wealth equals peace. But you've met people with all of these and still empty inside. You've seen the hollowness behind their smiles, the despair behind their applause, the loneliness behind their victories. And it taught you something priceless. Success without purpose is failure in disguise. That's why you've chosen a different road. You're not chasing what looks good, you're building what lasts. You're not fooled by the shine because you've learned to recognize the source of true light. Illusions fade, but truth imprints. You may forget the details of lies you once believed, but you never forget the freedom you felt when truth shattered them. That freedom becomes a marker in your soul. It teaches you to trust your discernment next time. It shows you the difference between peace and panic, between real and counterfeit, between God's hand and the enemy's trick. Each time you expose an illusion, your spirit grows stronger, your vision sharper, your steps firmer. And soon, illusions no longer scare you, they train you. They remind you that if a lie exists, the truth is even stronger. Chosen one, illusions cannot survive where clarity lives, and clarity has become your weapon. You do not walk blindly anymore, and that alone makes you unstoppable. The more the world tries to project what is false, the more your spirit insists on what is real. You are walking proof that illusions break, but truth remains. Chosen one, illusions can shape themselves into identities. They whisper labels that were never yours, words spoken over you by teachers, by family, by strangers who never saw you fully. They told you that you were average, that you were fragile, that you were destined for less. You wore those words for a time, thinking they were truth, until your spirit began to resist. That resistance was God rising inside you, pushing against the false names, breaking the illusion that tried to define you. You are not who they said you were. You are who God always knew you were. Illusions can even twist victories. They make you believe you succeeded because of chance, or because of someone else, or because you got lucky. They rob you of seeing God's hand in your breakthroughs. But you know the truth. Every door that opened, every escape you made, every battle you survived was orchestrated. There were times you should have lost, but you didn't. Times you should have fallen, but you stood. Times you should have been erased, but you rose. That is not coincidence, it is confirmation. No illusion can take credit for what heaven delivered. Chosen one, illusions try to wear permanence. They tell you the season you're in will never change, that the pain you feel will never lift, that the silence you endure will never break. They make temporary battles look eternal, but permanence belongs to God alone. No storm lasts forever, no valley stretches without end, no night refuses the sunrise. You've lived long enough to watch change unfold in real time. You've seen what once crushed you fade into a memory. You've seen what looked permanent dissolve overnight. That is why you don't fear seasons anymore. You know every illusion has an expiration date. Illusions take advantage of the senses. They feed the eyes with appearances, the ears with noise, the body with impulses. They appeal to flesh so that spirit stays asleep. But you are learning to live beyond the senses. You've learned that not everything attractive is good. Not everything loud is true. Not everything urgent is important. The world relies on illusions to keep people reactive. But you've grown past reaction. You pause, you listen, you discern. And in that pause, the illusion loses its power. Chosen one, illusions also operate through scarcity. They make you think there isn't enough time, enough love, enough opportunity, enough blessing. They make you rush to grab what you can before it's gone. But you were not chosen to live in scarcity. You were chosen to live in overflow. Scarcity is an illusion created to control. Abundance is a reality sustained by God. You have seen how He multiplies what little you had. You've seen doors open that no man could shut. You've seen provision arrive out of nowhere. Scarcity collapses when you remember that your source is not this world. There is also the illusion of perfection. It tells people they must appear flawless, never broken, never struggling. It convinces them to hide their wounds, to mask their flaws, to pretend they are whole. But perfection is not divine, it is deceptive. God never asked for perfection, He asked for truth. And truth includes scars. Truth includes weakness. Truth includes struggle. That is why your authenticity terrifies those trapped in illusion. You refuse to wear the mask. You refuse to pretend. You stand as you are, and that is what makes your light untouchable. Chosen one, illusions will attempt to disguise chains as comfort. They will hand you a routine that feels safe but robs you of growth. They will surround you with people who keep you company but drain your soul. They will give you habits that numb your pain but bury your purpose. Chains don't always rattle, they sometimes feel warm. That's why you had to be shaken, to feel the cost of staying in what was fake. That shaking was not punishment, it was deliverance. It was God showing you that comfort can be a cage when it is built on illusion. Illusions often travel through imitation. They present you with cheap copies of what is sacred. False love imitates real love but lacks sacrifice. False wisdom imitates truth but lacks power. False joy imitates peace but fades in hours. Imitations always fall apart when tested. That's why trials have been part of your journey, not to break you, but to expose what was never real. Every imitation you lost was making space for the authentic. And now you stand ready, not fooled by copies, waiting for what only God can deliver. Chosen one, illusions thrive in crowds. The more people surround them, the stronger they look. But truth thrives in solitude. That's why God pulled you aside, why He placed you in seasons where it felt like no one understood, where you walked roads alone. It wasn't abandonment, it was clarity. Crowds can drown truth, but silence reveals it. In the stillness, God showed you what was real. He showed you yourself. He showed you His plan. He showed you the difference between noise and direction. And now you walk stronger because you learn truth without the echo of the crowd. The illusion of finality is one of the heaviest. It tells you that when something ends, it's over. That loss is permanent. That doors don't reopen. That new beginnings aren't possible. But God specializes in resurrection. What the world calls finished, He calls preparation. What the world calls dead, He calls seed. You've lived this. You've watched opportunities you thought were gone return in better form. You've seen relationships restored in ways you couldn't have planned. You've seen life bloom where only ashes remained. Finality belongs to illusions, but eternity belongs to God. Chosen one, illusions make power look like control, but real power is surrender. The world teaches domination, manipulation, force, but you know that true power is releasing what isn't meant for you, trusting what you cannot see, standing firm without forcing outcomes. Illusions crumble when faced with surrender because they feed on control. You've broken their hold because you stopped trying to control everything. You released it, and in that release, you became unstoppable. Chosen one, illusions often appear in the shape of promises. They sound convincing, wrapped in grand words, painted with future rewards, designed to make you believe that waiting on them will give you everything you need. But illusions never intend to keep their word. They promise abundance but deliver emptiness, promise loyalty but bring betrayal, promise freedom but build cages. That's why your heart grew weary of words without actions. You've learned to wait for consistency. You've learned to measure truth not by what is said, but by what is lived. That discernment is why you cannot be trapped again. Illusions also creep into silence. They fill quiet spaces with lies, whispering doubts into your mind when the world around you grows still. They say, "You're forgotten, you're wasting time, you're alone." But silence is not abandonment, it is training. Silence is the classroom where illusions are exposed. When distractions fall away, you hear clearly what is real. That's why God placed you in lonely seasons, not to punish you, but to tune your ear to His voice. Now, even in silence, you recognize His presence. Even in emptiness, you sense His fullness. Illusions cannot survive in that kind of clarity. Chosen one, illusions thrive on speed. They push people to rush, to act without thought, to leap without wisdom. They pressure you into decisions with threats of scarcity or fear of missing out. But you were not called to chase, you were called to move with precision. You've learned that what is real will remain, that what is true does not demand panic. You've slowed down enough to see what others miss, and in that stillness, the illusion reveals its cracks. You don't have to rush, because what belongs to you will not be lost. There is also the illusion of strength in numbers. People believe that because many agree, the belief must be true. Entire cultures have accepted lies simply because they were repeated enough times. But truth has never needed a crowd. Truth has never relied on popularity. Truth stands alone, and eventually, the crowd falls silent. That's why you were called to walk a narrow path, why you never felt comfortable in groups that chased illusions. Your spirit knew the majority can be blind. Your vision was trained for truth, not approval. And now you walk freely, even when you walk alone. Illusions show themselves in cycles. They repeat the same patterns in your life, dressed in different faces, different settings, different opportunities. That is why you saw betrayal look different but feel the same. Why disappointment wore new clothes but carried the same sting. Why temptation approached with new words but the same agenda. These were not coincidences, they were cycles of illusion. But you've broken them. You recognized the pattern. You refused to participate. You cut ties with the lies. And because of that, the cycle ends with you. Chosen one, illusions hide inside comfort zones. They convince people that staying the same is safety, that stepping forward is danger, that change is too costly. They make cages look like homes, but you have felt the ache of stagnation, the slow death of playing small, the frustration of knowing there is more, but being told to stay still. That ache was your spirit breaking free from illusion. You chose growth over comfort, truth over safety, destiny over fear. And because of that, you are no longer confined by the illusions that hold the masses. Illusions disguise themselves as helpers. They appear as people offering guidance, opportunities, and partnerships. But their motives are not pure. Some wanted to control you. Some wanted to use you. Some wanted to dim you. But time revealed their true colors. You saw how their actions betrayed their words. You saw how their energy drained instead of built. And when you walked away, they called you ungrateful. But you were not ungrateful. You were awake. You refused to drink poison just because it was served in a golden cup. There is also the illusion of destiny stolen. The enemy tries to convince you that because of your past, you missed your chance. He replays your mistakes, your failures, your regrets. making them look like permanent roadblocks. But your destiny was written before those mistakes were ever made. No failure has the authority to erase what God established. What you thought was lost was never lost, it was preserved. Your detours did not cancel your purpose, they clarified it. That's why illusions of regret no longer hold you. You know that even in failure, you were being prepared. Chosen one, illusions sometimes wear blessings as a mask. They give temporary relief but hide long-term chains. A relationship may feel good in the moment, but leave your soul empty. A job may give money, but steal your peace. A habit may numb your pain, but bury your spirit. These are not blessings, they are illusions pretending to be. And you've learned the difference. Real blessings multiply, illusions drain. Real blessings align with your calling, illusions distract. Real blessings bring peace, illusions stir anxiety. You have been equipped to see beyond the mask, and now you choose only what is real. Illusions dissolve when exposed to light, and you are that light. Wherever you go, deception struggles to breathe. Masks slip, shadows scatter, lies tremble. This is why you've been misunderstood. This is why some distance themselves from you. They cannot keep illusions alive when you are near. And though it feels heavy, it is your purpose. You were not made to blend into shadows. You were made to reveal them. Every step you take exposes what others try to hide. And that is why you are chosen. Chosen one. Illusions twist the meaning of failure. They tell you that when you fall, you are finished. They tell you that mistakes disqualify you, that setbacks erase your worth. But you've lived long enough to know the opposite. Every failure carried a lesson. Every mistake carried growth. Every setback was a setup for something greater. Illusions try to shame you into silence, but truth has given you a voice. You are not the sum of your mistakes. You are the proof of God's redemption. Chosen one. Illusions often arrive wrapped in timing. They try to convince you that you are too late, or too early, or out of place. They whisper that you missed the window, that others have already taken what was meant for you, that destiny passed you by. But timing belongs to God, not to illusions. What He sets aside for you cannot be claimed by another. What He prepared will arrive at the exact moment you are ready to hold it. Illusions cannot control your timeline. They can only make you doubt it. And you have already seen that when it is your time, doors open that no force can shut. Illusions also twist appearances of weakness. They make seasons of rest look like laziness, seasons of rebuilding look like failure, and seasons of silence look like insignificance. But what looks like weakness to the world is strength to God. Rest is strategy. Rebuilding is wisdom. Silence is power. Illusions cannot comprehend the unseen preparation happening in your life. They judge only by the surface, but you know that depth is what sustains. While others mocked your pause, you were gathering strength. While others dismissed your silence, you were hearing clearly. While others laughed at your rebuilding, you were laying foundations they cannot shake. Chosen one. Illusions can disguise themselves as opportunities to fit in. They make belonging look like safety, agreement look like peace, and blending in look like wisdom. But belonging that costs your identity is not real. Agreement that requires silence is not truth. Blending in that erases your light is not wisdom. You were not made to fit. You were made to stand. That's why your spirit always resisted the pull to blend. You would rather walk alone in truth than be surrounded in illusion. And that is why you are free, even when others are chained by crowds. Illusions often attach themselves to memories of the past. They highlight your lowest moments, magnify your mistakes, and stretch them into chains that try to hold you back. But memory is not destiny. What happened then is not who you are now. Those moments were chapters, not the whole story. Illusions keep people replaying what God has already forgiven, making them prisoners of what no longer exists. But you have broken those chains. You refuse to let illusions of the past define your present. You know that scars are not proof of defeat. They are proof of survival. Chosen one, illusions also show up in fear of the future. They paint pictures of failure, whisper lies of disaster, and magnify what-ifs until people feel paralyzed. But none of those images are real. They are projections, empty movies playing in the mind, designed to stop movement before it begins. You've faced those fears before, and you discovered they were shadows with no substance. You walked into what you feared and found that God had already cleared the path. That's why you no longer bow to illusions of tomorrow. You know the same God who carried you yesterday stands in your future waiting with victory. Illusions sometimes come dressed as authority. They use titles, positions, and platforms to convince you that they have power over your life. They try to make you believe that your destiny is in their hands, that your worth depends on their approval. But no title can overrule God's choice. No platform can cancel his plan. No authority stands higher than the one who called you chosen. You've seen people rise high and fall overnight. You've seen the powerful exposed, the proud humbled, the loud silenced. And it reminded you that illusions can borrow crowns, but only truth wears them forever. Chosen one, illusions take advantage of impatience. They show you shortcuts that promise quick success, but hide long-term damage. They lure you into rushing, into grabbing what glitters, instead of waiting for what is gold. But you've learned to wait. You've learned that what comes quickly often leaves quickly. You've learned that what looks instant often carries hidden costs. And so you choose patience, not because it is easy, but because it protects you. While others burn out chasing illusions, you rise steady because you waited for what was real. Illusions also operate through distraction. They don't always stop you, they just keep you busy. They flood you with noise, with small battles, with meaningless pursuits, until your focus is scattered. They keep people running in circles, drained but never moving forward. But you have grown wise to their tactic. You've learned to ask, does this feed my spirit, or does it drain it? Does this move me closer to my calling, or does it keep me still? That clarity has become your weapon. You no longer waste energy on illusions that cannot carry you to destiny. Chosen one, illusions can make the temporary look eternal. They magnify pain in the moment until it feels endless. They highlight setbacks until they look permanent. But you've lived long enough to see that nothing in this world lasts except God's truth. You've seen storms pass, seasons shift, wounds heal. You've seen what once crushed you become a memory that no longer hurts. That is why you endure differently now. You know that time itself is a weapon against illusion. What feels overwhelming today will shrink tomorrow, and what is real will remain when all else fades. Illusions twist even the meaning of joy. They tell people that joy is found in possessions, in applause, in temporary highs. But true joy is rooted deeper. It is not built on what you have, but on who you are in God. It does not depend on circumstances, but on presence. That's why your joy confuses people. They see you walking with peace even when storms rage. They see you smiling even when resources are low. They see you hopeful even when outcomes are uncertain. They can't understand it, because they are still trapped in illusions. But you know joy that is unshakable. Chosen one, Illusions attempt to turn your own mind against you. They make you doubt your progress, question your growth, and minimize your victories. They whisper, "You're not doing enough. You're not far enough. You're not strong enough." But every time you listen closely, you remember how far you've come. You remember the battles you survived, the chains you broke, the illusions you overcame. And in that remembrance, truth drowns out lies. You are not behind. You are exactly where God has placed you. You are not weak. You are stronger than you've ever been. You are not small. You are chosen, and illusions cannot erase that. Chosen one. Illusions often try to hide inside success stories. They tell you that what you see on the outside is all there is, that the polished image is the truth. But behind every public smile, there are private tears. Behind every stage, there is silence. Behind every trophy, there is emptiness that cannot be filled with applause. You've learned to see beyond the presentation. You've trained yourself not to envy what looks perfect, because you know illusions collapse when the curtain falls. What others chase blindly, you examine with discernment, and that keeps you free from deception. Illusions also take shape as cycles of comfort. They tell you that because you survived once, you don't need to rise higher. They convince you that maintaining is enough, that mediocrity is safe. But you were not chosen for cycles of survival. You were chosen for breakthrough. Every time you felt the tug of dissatisfaction, it was your spirit refusing the illusion of just enough. You knew there was more, and that hunger was holy. It was the key that pulled you out of circles that kept others trapped for years. You refused the illusion of comfort, and that is why you keep ascending. Chosen one, illusions mimic intimacy. They make shallow connections look like depth, attention look like love, and validation look like acceptance. They convince people to settle for being seen but not known, touched but not valued, surrounded but not understood. But you recognized the emptiness in those connections. You felt the loneliness, even in the presence of a crowd. That was proof that illusion cannot satisfy. Real intimacy is rare, and it cannot be counterfeited. You would rather walk alone in truth than drown in illusions disguised as companionship, and that decision preserved your soul. Illusions often disguise themselves as fairness. They whisper that because others are ahead, you must be behind. They make you believe that life is measured in straight lines, that progress can be compared across souls. But God never wrote your story to be identical to anyone else's. Illusions trick people into thinking their unique road is a disadvantage, but you have discovered it is your power. Every twist, every delay, every detour is evidence that your destiny is unlike theirs. You've stopped chasing fairness because you know your portion is not based on illusion, it is based on promise. Chosen one, illusions try to blur boundaries. They tell you that saying yes to everything is kindness, that allowing yourself to be drained is love, that carrying others' burdens without limits is duty. But boundaries are divine. Illusions collapse when you remember that protecting your energy is wisdom, not selfishness. You were not chosen to pour endlessly into empty vessels. You were chosen to carry your light where it can multiply. And now you know the truth. Every time you set a boundary, you break an illusion. Every time you guard your peace, you protect your destiny. Illusions also wear the disguise of inevitability. They try to convince you that patterns of brokenness must continue, that generational pain must repeat, that cycles of failure are permanent. But inevitability is a lie. You were chosen to break cycles, to shatter patterns, to rewrite stories. The struggles of those before you may have been real, but they are not your chains. You carry authority to step out of the illusions that bound them. And as you do, you prove that inevitability is not truth, it is deception. You were chosen to demonstrate that cycles can end and destinies can be rewritten. Chosen one. Illusions twist the meaning of humility. They tell you humility is shrinking, silencing yourself, denying your gifts. They say humility is pretending you are less than you are, but that is not humility, it is bondage. Real humility is knowing your power and submitting it to God. It is standing in your light without arrogance and without apology. Illusions want you small because they know your shine exposes their lie. But you are done shrinking. You stand in truth now, and that truth carries humility and power together. Illusions often manifest as distractions in the form of success that doesn't align with your soul. They give promotions that lead away from purpose, recognition that feeds ego instead of spirit, money that chains instead of frees. But you've grown past chasing everything that looks like progress. You ask now, does this align with my calling? Does this build my soul? Does this serve my truth? That filter protects you from illusions dressed as advancement. You no longer chase what glitters. You wait for what is gold. Chosen one. Illusions even use failure as camouflage. They tell you that every closed door means rejection, every no means defeat, every ending means loss. But failure is not what it looks like. Failure is redirection. Every closed door pushed you closer to the one that was meant for you. Every no saved you from illusions disguised as blessings. Every ending cleared space for beginnings you could not see. Illusions call it loss, but truth calls it pruning. And pruning is not death, it is preparation for greater growth. Illusions sometimes appear in the form of strength borrowed from others. They make you believe that your worth is tied to who stands beside you, that your power comes from their presence, that your identity depends on their approval. But God has stripped those illusions from you. He showed you that you are strong even when alone, that your power stands even when others walk away, that your identity was written long before anyone could speak over you. Illusions crumble when you realize that your foundation is not borrowed, it is built within you. Chosen one, illusions wrap themselves in noise. They flood your mind with endless chatter, endless opinions, endless voices. They drown out truth until it feels like you cannot hear clearly. But you've discovered the value of silence. In silence, illusions lose their grip. In stillness, the lies fade. In quiet, the voice of God cuts through. That's why solitude has become your sanctuary. It is in the stillness that illusions collapse and clarity reigns. Illusions also feed on pride. They tell you that admitting weakness is failure, that asking for help is shameful, that vulnerability is dangerous. But pride is one of the strongest illusions. It builds walls that keep people trapped, unable to heal, unable to grow. You have broken that illusion by embracing honesty. You have admitted your wounds, and in doing so, you found healing. You have shown your vulnerability, and in doing so, you found strength. Pride loses power when truth is spoken aloud, and illusions lose power when masks fall. Chosen one. Illusions twist the meaning of waiting. They try to convince you that waiting is wasted time, that stillness is stagnation, that patience is weakness. But waiting has been your greatest training ground. In the waiting, your vision sharpened. In the waiting, your strength multiplied. In the waiting, your roots deepened. Illusions call it delay, but truth calls it preparation. And now you understand, the seasons that felt still were actually the seasons that built your foundation strong enough to carry what is real. Chosen one, illusions often cloak themselves in traditions. They make people believe that because something has been done the same way for generations, it must be truth. They convince the world that repetition equals righteousness, that longevity equals legitimacy. But you have been called to question what others accept without thought. You feel when a practice has lost its spirit, when a ritual has become empty, when a tradition no longer carries truth. You are not bound by what has always been. You are guided by what is real. And that is why illusions tied to history cannot chain you. Illusions also appear as labels placed on seasons of your life. They tell you that struggle means punishment, that loss means abandonment, that opposition means failure. But you've learned to see deeper. Struggle often hides strength. Loss often clears space for gain. Opposition often signals that you are on the right path. Illusions twist the meaning of your journey, but you've stopped believing them. You've seen God turn storms into blessings, deserts into training grounds, and valleys into testimonies. Illusions lied about what you were facing, but truth revealed why you were facing it. Chosen one. Illusions hide in comfort disguised as peace. They make stillness look like growth, busyness look like purpose, and routine look like destiny. But peace is not found in avoidance, it is found in alignment. You've learned that ignoring problems is not peace, that filling your days with noise is not purpose, that repeating the same cycles is not destiny. Illusions imitate peace to keep people stagnant, but you are no longer fooled. You know peace because you feel it even in storms, and illusions cannot copy what they do not carry. Illusions sometimes present themselves as false urgency in relationships. They make people believe they must settle quickly, attach quickly, commit quickly, or risk losing everything. But you know that what is real will not require panic. Real connection is not rushed, it is confirmed. Real partnership is not pressured, it is aligned. Real love is not anxious, it is steady. Illusions use urgency to bind people to what will hurt them later. But you are patient now, discerning now, stronger now. You refuse to be rushed into cages disguised as companionship. Chosen one. Illusions are woven into status. They tell people that value comes from titles, from recognition, from visible influence. They convince the world that without a platform, a soul has no worth. But you know better. You've seen people with titles fall, people with influence crumble, people with platforms collapse. You've also seen ordinary lives radiate extraordinary truth without needing recognition. Illusions measure worth by what can be seen. Truth measures worth by what is eternal. That's why you no longer chase validation. You live anchored in your calling. Illusions twist healing into avoidance. They make people think that distracting themselves is recovery, that numbing pain is healing, that hiding wounds is strength. But you've learned that true healing comes from facing the wound, not hiding it. Illusions tell people to cover scars. Truth uses scars as testimony. Illusions try to silence the broken. Truth rebuilds them stronger. That's why your healing has power. It is not pretend, it is real. You faced the pain others ran from, and in doing so, you broke the illusion that suffering must be hidden. Chosen one. Illusions take advantage of loneliness. They whisper that because you are walking alone, you are unloved. They twist solitude into rejection, silence into abandonment. But you have discovered that loneliness is not emptiness, it is space. Space for growth, space for clarity, space for God's voice to grow louder. Illusions try to make you crave company at any cost, but you refused. You learned to sit in silence until truth revealed itself. That strength keeps you from settling for illusions disguised as companionship. Illusions can also mimic wisdom. They use big words, complex reasoning, and intellectual pride to convince people they carry answers. But wisdom is not noise, it is fruit. True wisdom produces clarity, peace, and life. Illusions produce confusion, pride, and emptiness. That's why you don't believe everything that sounds intelligent. You look at the fruit, you measure the outcome, and because of that, illusions dressed as wisdom collapse in front of you. Chosen one, illusions often appear through repetition of failure. They make you believe that because you stumbled once, you will always stumble. That because doors closed before, they will never open again. They try to turn the past into prophecy, but you've lived through cycles that broke this lie. You've seen failures become lessons, closed doors lead to better ones, endings birth beginnings. Illusions tried to bind you to history, but you chose destiny instead. You know that every time you rise, you prove the illusion wrong. Illusions disguise themselves in achievements. They make people believe that the checklist of life degrees, houses, careers, wealth equals fulfillment. They keep souls chasing milestones while starving inside. But you've watched enough to know that achievements do not guarantee peace. You've seen people gain everything and still be restless. Illusions paint success as substance, but substance is found in truth, and that's why you've shifted your focus. You don't chase milestones anymore. You build meaning. You don't measure success by applause. You measure it by alignment. Chosen one, illusions can even wrap themselves in spirituality. They create rituals without presence, faith without power, words without heart. They convince people that performance is devotion, that appearance is belief, that repetition is faith. But you know that God cannot be fooled by illusions. He searches hearts, not habits. He listens to sincerity, not performance. That's why you are not caught in empty shows of religion. You walk with him directly, in truth, in honesty, in raw connection. Illusions collapse when real presence enters, and presence walks with you. Illusions thrive in fear of judgment. They make people wear masks to avoid criticism, to hide flaws, to pretend strength. They build entire identities on the fear of others' opinions. But you have broken free from that prison. You know people's opinions shift like the wind, but truth stands like the mountain. You no longer live for approval, because you already carry God's affirmation. And when illusions of judgment rise, you stand unshaken, because you no longer fear the shifting eyes of the crowd. Chosen one, illusions try to disguise weariness as weakness. They tell you that being tired means you failed, that needing rest means you're not strong, that slowing down means you're falling behind. But truth tells you the opposite. Rest is not weakness, it is renewal. Slowing down is not failure, it is wisdom. Weariness is not shame, it is the body's reminder to recharge. Illusions pressure you to grind endlessly. Truth invites you to rest securely. That's why your pace looks different. You are steady, not frantic. You are rooted, not restless. And that is why illusions cannot control your rhythm anymore. Chosen one, illusions can disguise themselves as logic. They whisper that only what can be measured is real, only what can be explained has value, only what can be proven deserves trust. But life has shown you otherwise. The things that mattered most, peace in storms, strength in weakness, clarity in confusion, could never be measured. Yet they were undeniable. Illusions limit reality to the visible, but you walk with vision beyond sight. That's why you can step forward even when you don't see the full path. Because you know reality is greater than what the illusion calls logic. Illusions thrive in noise that pretends to be urgency. They bombard minds with endless updates, endless chatter, endless alerts. They demand attention for things that don't matter, while disguising what truly matters in silence. But you have grown skilled at filtering. You listen for what carries weight. You sense what aligns with destiny. You ignore the noise that feeds only distraction. Illusions collapse when faced with focus. And now your focus is sharp, cutting through what is shallow, anchoring only to what is real. Chosen one, illusions twist the meaning of worth. They make people believe their value depends on productivity, on what they produce, on what they achieve. They push souls into cycles of constant striving, always working, but never arriving. But you have discovered that your worth existed before you did a single thing. You were chosen before your first achievement, set apart before your first success. Illusions tried to convince you that worth must be earned, but truth revealed that worth is given by God and cannot be revoked. Illusions can even masquerade as hope. They give people false visions of quick fixes, instant success, easy victories. They stir excitement that fades as soon as reality hits. But true hope sustains through storms, stands through delays, survives through silence. You know the difference now. Illusions leave people empty, but real hope fills even when circumstances are empty. That's why your hope seems strange to others. They see no reason for it, but you keep standing. They see no evidence, but you keep believing. Because your hope is not illusion, it is anchored. Chosen one, illusions also come in the form of counterfeit peace. They numb instead of heal, distract instead of resolve, silence truth instead of face it. They convince people that avoiding pain is the same as conquering it. But you have faced pain, and that is why you have peace. Illusions can imitate calm on the surface, but beneath them lies unrest. You've learned that real peace doesn't come from what is avoided, but from what is overcome. And that is why you are not shaken by surface calm anymore. You search for what is underneath. Illusions hide in shadows of envy. They tell people that what others have is what they need, that someone else's journey is their measuring stick, that blessings are scarce. But envy is an illusion built on lies. You've seen that your path cannot be compared. You've learned that what belongs to you will not miss you. You've discovered that another's rise is not your fall. That revelation broke envy's power. Illusions want you competing, but truth reminds you that destiny is never duplicated. Chosen one, illusions also distort the meaning of freedom. They present indulgence as liberty, recklessness as independence, rebellion as strength. But freedom is not the absence of order, it is the presence of alignment. You've tasted the false freedoms the world offers, and you've seen how they bind tighter with every step. Real freedom is walking in truth, carrying peace without chains, standing in light without shame. Illusions offer you cages painted gold, but you walk away because you know the difference. Illusions disguise themselves as opportunities that demand compromise. They appear glittering and promising, but require you to shrink your values, silence your voice, or dim your light. They test whether you will betray yourself for temporary gain. But you have learned the cost of compromise, and you refuse it. You would rather wait in silence than accept a stage built on lies. You would rather stand alone in truth than belong in circles built on illusions. And that refusal is why you remain chosen. Chosen one, illusions creep into language. They twist words until meaning is lost. They call bondage freedom. They call pride strength. They call chaos authenticity. They manipulate vocabulary until lies sound noble. But you recognize the weight behind words. You feel the spirit behind speech. That's why illusions of language cannot deceive you. You know that words without alignment collapse quickly, but truth spoken quietly endures. Illusions often arrive disguised as inevitability. They tell you the pain of your family must be your pain. The failures of your past must be your future. The limitations of your environment must be your ceiling. They convince people that they cannot escape cycles. But you are the exception. You broke what others said could never be broken. You refused what others accepted as permanent. You chose to see beyond inevitability, and in doing so, you revealed that destiny is greater than illusion. Chosen one, illusions will try to shape themselves into comfort through distraction. They give people endless entertainment, endless noise, endless options to keep them numb. They hide emptiness behind busyness, so people never stop long enough to see the truth. But you have stopped, you have paused, you have faced what others avoid, and in that stillness, illusions lost their grip. You know that distractions are chains disguised as relief, and you refuse to let them keep you from reality. Illusions twist even the meaning of generosity. They tell people that giving is weakness, that kindness is exploitation, that sacrifice is foolish. But generosity is power. Every seed planted multiplies. Every act of kindness ripples. Every sacrifice builds unseen strength. Illusions try to block generosity because they know it carries eternal weight. But you give anyway. You pour without fear, knowing that nothing real is ever wasted. Chosen one, illusions hide in the appearance of endings. They convince people that when something closes, it is over forever. But you have learned that endings are often beginnings in disguise. You've seen how loss cleared space for better, how goodbyes created room for alignment, how collapse built the foundation for growth. Illusions call it destruction, but truth calls it transformation, and that transformation cannot be stopped.